All right, it's about that time. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to quickly turn it over to my colleague, Winnie Chan, who's going to introduce us and lead off this session. But excited to have you here and look forward to what I think will be a really meaningful discussion. Uh, Winnie, I'll go ahead and ask you to get started.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to our session. So today we will talk about how do you think about thinking about using after-school staff of color in our teacher pipelines. Is a report that we recently completed, and it will be released in May. We're also joined by two colleagues from Expand Ed, Marina Cofield and Cody Malakon. I'll quickly introduce myself and then I'll have them introduce themselves. So my name is Winnie Chan. I am the Ed Trust Research Director for the P12 division. In our division, we do research ranging from pre-K education to college and career readiness. And today we're talking about teacher diversity and equity, which is a really important topic for our research team. And I'll turn it to Marina and Cody to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Winnie, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marina Cofield. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Expanded Schools, and I also supervise our portfolio of innovation programs, including our Pathways Fellowship.
A little bit of technical difficulty. Cody, would you like to?
Certainly, I'll jump in. Good afternoon. Oh, sorry.
We do a lot of professional development and training for after-school staff, as well as policy research and grant making and management for after-school programs across the city. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cody.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Marina. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cody Malonson. I'm the director of the Pathways Fellowship Program, which aims to really utilize the after-school space, as well as looking at the college population as well to identify aspiring educators of color. And today I'm excited to share our work and what we've learned so far.
Great. So we'll hear more from Cody and Marina in a little bit. First, I would like to share some of our high-level findings from our report. Again, our report will be released in May, so please stay tuned, come to our website and get the full report in about a month or so. So what we did is that we interview with another external partner, a number of teacher candidates who are attending different type of teacher preparation program, including grow your own programs. We also interview the program staff from those programs and their external partners. And our goal was to really understand what make after-school staff a great candidates for becoming teachers. So that is exactly what we found. The first thing we found is that many after-school staff already thinking about teaching, and the after-school program just makes it even more clear to them that they would like to become teachers. So this is a qualitative study, so I'll share some of the quotes from the participants so you can get a sense of really how they think about the experience. So after school and out of school time as a stepping stone to becoming a teacher. So for example, this participant said, so I guess seeing what teachers did and taking that knowledge and experience and trying to implement it in the after school portion of it made me feel like I could do this. I could be a teacher too. So many participants talked about during their after school tenure, they actually worked with teachers a lot. And through that experience, it became more crystal clear that teaching is a profession that they would like to take part in. And the next thing we found is that after school, similarly, this participant said, I saw a lot of myself in them, the youth served in the after school. I grew up the same way. My parents had to work really hard in those type of jobs. And I feel like when I was their age, I wasn't really allowed to speak Spanish. So I was the quiet kid. And I feel like now it's more acceptable. And now we're able to provide just a lot more resources. So I feel like we can really, really make an impact. Again, this participant talked about their commitment to serving students of color because they have had those experiences and they would like to become the teacher that they did not have for students in the future. And we also learned that after school experience actually provide a lot of opportunities for these staff members to learn how to be a teacher. So for example, they talked a lot about they are actually better able to connect with students and families because of their after school experience in comparison to their other colleagues in the teacher preparation program. This participant said, it was different in the sense where I was able to connect with students because I had that experience, and especially connect with students from different backgrounds. My other colleagues who didn't really have experience connecting with youth had a harder time being able to teach the students because they couldn't make that connection. So many of them talked about the connection with students and family was critical as they were going through the teacher preparation program and also as they became teachers. So this one even said, I would say influence it even more, the after school experience, because even more to work with Latinx and Black children, it let me know that sometimes students need people to speak up for them. A few other participants talked about how having that strong connection and having the first-hand experience working with students of color and their families really helped them to understand what their needs are and how to speak up for those students. And from all these interviews, we also learned that there are a few promising practices that preparation programs are doing to really help the teacher candidate to succeed. First thing is culturally responsive and anti-racist pedagogy. Many of the teacher candidates talked about how during their preparation program, the programs were very aware of the fact that racism exists in our school system and how they need to teach their teacher candidates anti-racist practices so that they're making sure that teachers are going into the classroom being able to dismantle racism that affect the learning of students of color. And the other thing is mentoring and coaching. I think the mentoring, particularly being mentored by another teacher of color, was particularly powerful for many of the candidates because not only they're getting the practical advice from an actual teacher, but they're also getting some of the more social and emotional advice from a teacher of color, how to work in this system as a person of color and what are some of the resources that will be needed as they. And finally, we learned that the testing to become a teacher sometimes can be a barrier. So many of the programs offer test preparation for their candidates, and also testing can be expensive. So financial aid is really important. I think most, if not all, of the program actually provides some kind of tuition support so that the teacher candidates can have some financial support as they go through the program and not have to worry about not being able to pay or take on too much debt. However, we also know that some of the Black teachers told us they did not feel as supported. They felt like sometimes the programs were more geared toward making white teachers feel comfortable in a classroom instead of focusing on the issues that are really important to Black teachers. So for example, this participant said, the program is doing a very good job of making white people feel comfortable in urban environments, but it's not doing a good enough job of making us feel comfortable, as meaning Black teachers. I guess they feel like because our students are people of color and this is our kind of environment that we should be okay already. So even though by and large, many of the participants talked about the programs being supported, we see that some Black teachers do feel like there needs to be more focus and discussion around anti-racist pedagogy and how it affects not only Black students, but Black teachers going into the profession. So these are some of the highlights we want to share today with you from the report. Again, the full report is coming out soon. Please come to our website and download it when it's available. The next portion of this session is going to be a conversation led by my colleague, Eric Duncan, with Marina and Cody to really dig deep and learn more about Expand Ed schools and the great practices that they're doing to help bring after-school staff member into the teacher pipeline.
Thank you, Winnie. Really excited to dive into this conversation. Winnie did a great job of giving an overview of the study that we just did. So we were able actually to interview candidates from 7 programs across the country. We had a pretty geographically diverse set of programs. We started out trying to look for grow your own programs. So the type of programs where you sort of start at the after school space, you're provided supports in preparation to become a full-time staff member, and you are aided in your ability to become a full-time teacher. Again, with this theory that because the after school space is both ripe in terms of the experiences that candidates have for folks to enter the profession full time, but also it's a little bit more diverse than the traditional sort of folks entering the pipelines. We thought it'd be a really good space to figure out, what's the secret sauce here? What is it that makes these candidates great? What are ways that we can better support them and target them particularly? And what are the best ways to sort of make sure that they are successful as classroom teachers, given the experiences that they've had and some of the just great preparation that can be done to target those populations. So one of the programs that we looked at was Expand Ed Schools. I'll give Marina and Cody a little bit of time to introduce these schools, but I will say from our experience, one of the really powerful things about this group is they are intentional about using the after school space as a preparation space and a avenue and a channel through which folks who are interested in teaching can sort of get their feet wet and get the experiences that are needed to make them really strong candidates in the future. They're also they are in New York, and they're part of a larger initiative that Cody's going to talk about that is targeted towards increasing the racial diversity of the workforce, in particular Black males. So I think this is a really good group to sort of learn from. I'm going to close out my desktop share so we can get a little bit more intimate and hear from our esteemed panelists. But let me first allow Marina and or Cody to just introduce a little bit more about Expand Ed, the mission, the vision, before we sort of look at why did the program really decide to utilize the after school space to advance the interest of growing the teacher profession and making it more diverse. So Marina, why don't you start with sort of an overview of Expand Ed? Cody, you can add on from a programmatic perspective and share about some of your experiences targeting these statewide goals around increasing the diversity and city goals around increasing the diversity of the workforce.
So Expand Ed Schools is the largest after-school intermediary organization in New York City. And so what that means is that our job is to really advocate for and build a strong system of after-school programs to serve youth across our city. And we do that through a variety of different strategies. A lot of it is professional development, training, and coaching supports for after-school directors and educators. And then we also do grant making and grant management to after-school programs across the city, as well as a lot of research and policy work to advocate for really strengthening after-school and seeking sustainable funding for after-school programs. So within that, we do a lot of work directly with after-school educators and have that they're sort of our bread and butter and really sort of helping them to deliver high quality, enriching, supportive programming in after school across the city, but really also focusing on them as our core audience and thinking about helping them develop life-sustaining long-term careers in the fields of their interest. So it's really that part of our work, thinking about how to really provide career pathways for after-school educators that led into our work with the Pathways Fellowship. And just to say, like, both Cody and I have, came to Expand Ed from a background working in K-12 education. We have experience both in the charter sector as well as working in the New York City Department of Education, and have seen the challenge of really bringing in a high quality, well-prepared workforce of teachers, and particularly teachers of color, which we see as critical to really meeting the needs of our youth. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cody to talk a little bit more about the Pathways Fellowship that he leads.
Thank you so much, Marina. Eric, I'm excited to be here today to share more about our awesome program, the lessons we've learned, and the challenges we face in the road ahead. But just to build off of what you offered earlier about this larger initiative that's taking place in New York City, a lot of our work here at Expand Ed has been inspired by the NYC Men Teach. And some of our early iterations of the program model really captured a lot of their best practices. So our program is a cohort-based program, and we build that program around 5 essential components. So one is our professional development and training. The second is the after-school practicum. The third is mentorship. The fourth is career support. And also, the very last one is networking skills. And the professional development and after-school practicum sort of go hand in hand. So the professional development is where we train our fellows around a particular content area, whether it's literacy, STEM, or computer science, and is connected to an actual program that is suited for after school. So we use these programs to give our fellows an opportunity to learn the foundational teaching skills. So instructional strategies and classroom management, these are the programs that we use to really expose our fellows to those important skills that are necessary for early career teachers to be successful. Inside of that after school practicum is where they get an opportunity to apply these skills, to learn, to feel, to grow. And it's the after school practicum is where our fellows spend most of their time really honing their skills. And also a very important aspect is also connecting with the students. As you mentioned before, a lot of our fellows come from the communities of color. They've grown within those communities, and they now get an opportunity to work in the very schools that they've grown up in. And so the after school practicum really gives and brings all of it together for the fellow. The next piece is mentorship, as you mentioned before. Is also noted across the programs that you've studied, how important mentorship is. Well, we are fortunate enough to provide that to our fellows. And it comes from an active certified K-12 teacher that provides the type of guidance and support, not only around the instructional pieces, but also around the career support, helping our fellows to understand the pathways into the classroom, the certification, and what it really takes to persist as a teacher of color. Then also we have career support, which is really driven by our team, the Pathways team. This is where we utilize our connections with district and charter partners in terms of really presenting opportunities to our fellows, as well as the graduate schools as well. I don't want to leave out higher education. They're also a valuable partner in this work as well. And we present the different opportunities and pathways for our fellows to enter into the classroom. So we have fellows who are hired by charter schools, who are hired through New York City Teaching Fellows, which is a program that's an extension of New York City Department of Education, for individuals taking the alternative certification route. And so we also have fellows who go on to get their master's before they enter the classroom to teach. And inside that career support is really where we do that type of work with our fellows. And with the networking is where we connect our fellows to sort of the veterans in the field, other leaders of within the K-12 education that can provide the type of inspiration and motivation to our fellows, to give them those nuggets of wisdom about how to prepare and train well and persist through the profession.
Excellent overview. I'm really glad, actually. So we're going to dive a little bit more into the after school space. And it's such a timely discussion. There was a great question asked about some of the influx of federal dollars that are coming into to states and going down to school districts. And a lot of decisions are being made about using those funds to supplement some of the programming or offerings and infrastructure needed to ensure that schools are ready to make up for some of the unfinished learning, right? And so we know first, starting with the after school space, out of school time, we obviously recommend tutoring being provided during school hours. But we also can understand that there's going to be additional staff that's needed, but also that the after school and out of school space can really be a key way to support this work, and being intentional about using those experiences from those candidates, getting really, really strong opportunities to be in schools, learn, and enticing that population to think about teaching and providing those supports. So, Marina, I want to start with you real quick. You guys are foundational where the after school space is so important to the programming you provide. Talk about the decision you all made to really utilize that space for preparation ground and why it's so important to you.
We, we, like you said, we start by with working in the after school space and with after school educators, and really wanting to help them chart career paths that are life sustaining and long term for them. Working in after school tends to be sort of fairly temporary or seasonal work, and it's also low wage work without lots of inherent opportunities for career advancement just within the after school space. And so we really looked at, how can we support our after school educators as they continue to grow and move in their careers. And we really see K-12 education and careers in teaching and even school leadership as really a natural fit for our after-school educators. That they bring so many assets that really can add value to experience as a K-12 educator. So, for example, after-school educators really have a deep grounding in youth development, in relationship building, both with children and with families. They're really grounded in community-based organizations, and so have access to a deep understanding of community histories and community culture, which is so important in terms of becoming the kind of educator who creates a culturally and historically responsive classroom. Our after-school educators are also really well-versed in meeting and addressing the social emotional needs of children, and really creating fun, joyful, exciting, hands-on learning experiences for kids, whether those be in arts or in sports or in STEM or literacy. They really have experience delivering learning that really engages children and is relevant to them, which we think is, to the point earlier, is really important right now in this time to re-engage kids in school and in learning, to bring them back. That I think so much of the focus has been on sort of learning recovery or learning loss. And what we believe is that although the need for tutoring and remediation programs is going to be essential, just as essential will be the sort of enrichment and the opportunity to build back strong relationships with kids and create learning experiences that are joyful and relevant for them, to really re-engage them in their education. So we believe that after school educators have an important role to play in that work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I appreciate the natural fit that you said to sort of allude to the title of our report. So very validating. Thank you for that. But yeah, to your point, the after school space is so ripe. It's so important to talk about it. I'll add just quickly an anecdote. During my time at the Department of Ed, I visited a number of grow your own programs across the country to just see sort of what makes them work. One of the really big takeaways I had went to visit the Grow Your Own Illinois program running through Chicago. They are so intentional about creating or having a community partner that's involved, and having their candidates be extremely active in the community. Chicago's kind of an organizing town, but you speak to principals at schools that hired these candidates. Overwhelmingly, they say they're just ready to teach, and they hit the ground running from day one. They are some of our strongest advocates and connectors to communities, and are just a great asset, and want to stay in the schools for a number of years. So really appreciate your sort of alluding to the strength in terms of the relationships that these candidates have been able to cultivate and build as to why they're so important. Uh, so, Cody, I want to shift a little bit to you. You named a ton of programming that you all provide through your the work that you're leading, and really appreciate it. Want to narrow into down into what's been effective. What
Hmm.
are the practices that you've led, you've seen that have really supported some of the goals that you all have set to increase the diversity of the workforce, but also to support the candidates who you're ultimately targeting and are putting into classrooms in your state?
Yeah, certainly. So if I had to narrow it down to the top three, I would say it's our professional development, mentorship, and career support. And I want to make a connection to a point that was highlighted earlier about the importance was within these programs to really bring an anti-racist lens approach to preparing teachers. And I want to say inside of our professional development, we do work that is probably also present, especially for our education majors, inside of their teacher training programs, like getting them to lesson plan and think about what it means to differentiate lessons and how to manage classrooms. But I think what really we do well inside of our program is really making the are really focusing around the racial ethnic identities that's present in our group. And by the way, we serve a majority population of students of color. And so like really being able to tease out that identity within our work and really show them the importance of their role as an individual, a person of color, but also what it means to teach students of color and to be cognizant, because just because you're a person of color going through a teacher education program doesn't necessarily mean they're meeting the needs of really helping you to understand and unpack your identity and potential impact and influence with connecting with students of color. And I want to say within that professional development space, which I treat really sacred, is the time that we do this really precious work around helping our fellows to really understand their identities and helping them to transform their mindsets around being a teacher of color. The second would be the mentorship. We get a lot of feedback from our fellows around how important it is to connect with an active teacher who can show them around. So we're not always present in the school. So those teachers, especially in earlier cohorts, were school based, and our fellows have had the opportunities to go inside of their classrooms and really be able to learn from those teachers, um, and learn from the teachers in areas where they struggle. And oftentimes, our fellows, when they first begin, it's around behavior management and relationship building, really understanding how to make the connections to students, understanding what students need, understanding what different behaviors represent in terms of how do you respond and how do you really identify what the student is really asking for without them really saying it. And I think our mentors play a critical part in helping our fellows when they're on the ground with implementation of the work. And the last piece is career support. And in particular, with this current cohort that we have, where a majority of them come from the CUNY college campuses in New York City, they value that one-to-one advisement. They've even made comparisons with some of their own opportunities at their home-based schools and colleges to be able to connect with their advisors. I think our fellowship, our staff is very dedicated to the development of our fellows, and we spend a great deal of time from week to week on coaching them around their career goals. And they really appreciate it because it helps them to land in a place, even if it's not in teaching, where they really desire to be.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Uh, so, we've seen some of the successes and things that are important for these types of programs to really be successful. Want to just shift a little bit to one of the aspects of the report that we is included in our report, which is some state policy recommendations based on conversations we had. And then, Cody, I'll shift back to you about whether these sort of resonate in a way that would support your program, and what other things you think are really necessary from a state or district level or prep level to continue supporting the growth of your program. So, wanted to highlight sort of five main recommendations. Would love to hear feedback in the chat if any of these resonate as well. First, looking at sort of the alumni of some of the non-traditional teacher prep pathways, And the after school candidates that they serve with that experience, a lot of the programs that we interviewed brought up the fact that we're not able to gather an alumni base to really support this work, to figure out what's successful, to bring them in to help mentor, to Cody's point, some of the candidates that are currently going through this. And so the resources to create alumni networks, but also to sort of give them incentives for going through these types of programs. Collecting data. I'm sure Cody will bring this up as well, but I think there's a bit of a struggle uh, with programs having the capacity to collect data that's reliable and consistent, and really looking at what are the individuals that have this experience and how effective are they in the classroom, measurable data. And so we tried to do that, but I think the state has the resources to really do this in a way that's more than just sort of select programs, but at a larger state and system level. Guidance on these culturally affirming programming and practices. Cody brought it up. The emphasis on really cultivating the individual uh, within these candidates, as candidates of color. And we see what Black candidates said in our report about the need for continued culturally affirming programming. Um, Looking at just as a sort of policy aspect, but a lot of grow your own programs in states that provide support to grow your own programs only look at paraprofessionals as defined in a different way than some of the after school and out of school staff folks to be eligible for going into the pipeline and getting supports. And a subtle change of adding the after school and out of school candidates into that category could create a much more comprehensive pipeline and recruiting measure for programs to say, we have some supports for you if you're interested. And then the retention supports, uh, not in addition to uh, the programs really needing support in creating alumni networks and incentives, the retention supports, the opportunities for growth, the intentionality behind ensuring that the uh, the experience for folks with after school experience is meaningful. That was something that was brought up as a need. So, Cody, shifting to you, if any of these resonate, you can start with that. But if there's anything else in addition, in terms of supports that your program and candidates of color, particularly who have after school experiences and out of school time experience, what they really need in terms of the resources to support the continued preparation of those candidates.
Yeah, certainly. I would say all of these resonate with me. As we speak, I'm beginning to form a working group of thought leaders in New York City, whether they're actually the practitioners or whether they're in like nonprofit work as me as well, to really begin to think about on the ground level how do we tackle these. But definitely, as I think about what the challenges have been around the outreach and engagement of our alumni base and thinking through the challenges that they face once they leave our program, I definitely see a critical need to be able to allocate resources to further develop and help them along the way once they're further in the pipeline and into the classroom. The next piece that's very important is the collection of data and being able to use that data to really build the type of programming around the profile of the candidates that we would like to serve. And so, again, that hasn't been collectively brought together and build the types of threads we need to see the narrative of why it's so challenging to put teachers of color, in particular men of color, into the teaching pipeline. And again, the Pathways Working Group that we're beginning to form is also going to tackle that on the local level in New York City, but definitely for state. That's a critical area to invest in. And with the next two pieces, developing guidance and including after school OST candidates and paraprofessional, I would love to engage our higher education partners around what this looks like from their formal programs, TP programs, to really be able to build those out in a more responsive way, but also inclusive way, that we also think about how to elevate the paraprofessionals once they're in the pipeline and have had a particular number of years of training. How do we use that to move them into teaching roles?
Thank you. Absolutely. Uh, I I really feel for you all in terms of the data question. I think that's a struggle for a lot of programs, and uh, I think with so many goals and ideas about what you want to do and who you want to serve and how you want to serve folks, being intentional about the after school space can sometimes uh, maybe not be the highest priority. Um, with the understanding, I think you understand how important after school experience can be. But that's another big reason why we wanted to illuminate the findings in this report. Um, okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and get back to a little bit more of an intimate conversation. So, uh, can you talk about, in particular, Marina and Cody? Feel free to add on to this. Uh, we're, we've heard about sort of the non-traditional pathways. We've heard about what you've done as an entity to support this work. Talk a little bit about the ways that prep programs, whether traditional or non, can partner with after-school programs with intentionality to recruit and support after-school staff, making sure that both there's a clean and clear pipeline to the profession for after-school staff that they're aware of and have incentive to go through, but also that there are the right supports that target the after-school and out-of-school staff and help them and to leverage some of their expertise to become strong classroom teachers.
Sure. I mean, I think that, teacher education programs would do really well to see after-school programs as sites, that are rich in future teachers and places where they can go to recruit candidates for their programs. I think that, sometimes the bias of sort of the K-12 education space is to think that, after-school educators could stand to learn so much from K-12 educators about sort of the kind of things that Cody was referencing around lesson planning, around classroom management, around formative assessment, around those kinds of skills and strategies that K-12 educators have. But I think that we should think about it in the flip also of what the K-12 education space stands to learn from after-school educators and the kinds of skills and the deep expertise around students and communities that they bring. So certainly I think that the teacher education programs would do well to really see after-school programs as a site for recruiting candidates into their programs. And I would say that if they do that, they really need to be prepared to meet those after-school educators where they are and provide the supports that they need, because oftentimes after-school educators are non-traditional college students. They may have had a break in their college education experience. They're people who are, maybe a little bit older than your traditional college student and are, supporting their families at the same time that they're working and therefore need creative supports to help them in their journey toward college completion and transition into the teaching sector. And then the other thing I would say is that, the other kind of support that would be incredibly valuable would be if teacher education programs would really see experience in after school as a valuable part of a teacher education program and therefore credit worthy. That, teacher education students receive credit for student teaching in the K-12 setting, but they don't typically receive credit for work in an after-school program. Whereas we feel like the experience that they're getting working in after school in our program or just independently is incredibly valuable in helping to prepare them for a career in teaching, and that having that experience recognized as a formal part of their teacher preparation would be incredibly valuable.
And Cody, did you have anything to add before?
Yeah, I think Marina did a fantastic job at laying that out, but I would just reemphasize the flexibility around the credentialing process. And I think that it takes both higher education officials and state officials to recognize what this potential pool of talent workforce is in need of and being able to respond to it. So I think that flexibility and really being more responsive will give the population that we work with in after school greater access to the teaching profession.
Absolutely. And a really great point about giving candidates with after school experience uh, something tangible in terms of credit. We talked about restructuring programming and ensuring that prep programs are leveraging those experiences and really finding the strength and knowledge that it's gained from that to retrain candidates or maybe fast track them in some way. But I really like the substantive, uh, give credits and sort of help them to matriculate through prep programming, maybe through a different route that is more for policy practice based. So thank you for that. Uh, let's see. Uh, any other questions from the chat? Before we go, we have about 3 more minutes. Uh, we have a number of advocates, folks from community-based organizations, practitioners. Uh, what are some advices? Do you have advice for ways to intentionally target these communities, ways to advocate even for funding or use of funding at the district and prep level to support this work? Any sort of last piece of advice that you have for folks who are going back into their states and thinking about ways to even leverage federal funding or start to intentionally build out these programs to be successful?
I'll start because right now we're in recruitment phase. So we're about to graduate one cohort and bring in another cohort. And I want to really tackle the angle of how to target this population and what we're learning. I think one of the things that we find in the work, especially when it comes to men of color, the disconnect between the K through 12 schooling system and their experiences. So oftentimes they're not having the best, even if they are high achieving, the best experiences within their K through 12 education, and being able to recruit them back is very difficult if they've had, such a negative experience. And so one of the things we really work on, as I mentioned earlier, is really having that affirming model that really centers their identity in the work, and that what we build in content represents what they need and represents the cultural assets that they bring to the table. And I think that's so key if you really want men of color to join your teaching pipelines, is to really be able to build the work around their identity, their needs, and to really demonstrate that you are authentically responding to who they are. And it's something that we continuously apply. Even as a leader of color, a man of color, a former classroom teacher, I constantly push myself to think about that, what it means. Because sometimes when we're so heavily indoctrinated within higher education, you're not as cognizant of what you're responding to, and what really attracts you to a certain field and what forces you away from a particular profession. And if we want to call them, we need to represent them in the most authentic way that we can.
Well said. Want to give you a chance, Maureen, if you had anything else to add before we close out.
No, I mean, I think that Cody made some really excellent points. I think I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I think that, I think that right now, as was mentioned in the chat, there is an influx of funding from the, recent stimulus package. And I think that, school districts at the local level who, have historically, professed a real commitment to diversifying their teacher workforce, could really put some of that sort of, their money where their mouth is by really investing in after school educators who are largely educators of color, and really supporting their growth and development as sort of the next generation of teachers, rather than just relying on sort of the traditional pipelines that that spit out teachers who are often not well prepared to really meet the challenges in our schools and communities, and who don't last in the profession, right, as a result. And I think that really making that investment in members of the community who have been working with kids and families and who understand the needs of the community in order to prepare them to be our next generation of teachers would be money well spent.
Perfect. Thank you both. Really, really appreciate the hard work that you do every day, but also taking the time to grace us with your wisdom and your experiences. It's been a pleasure working with you both through the report and in preparation for this. You all are amazing. Really look forward to continuing the work. For folks who joined, thank you so much for joining. We're really excited to release this report in the next month or so, and hope that you really use it to think creatively about ways to leverage this really strong set of candidates in the after school space, particularly as you're thinking about strategies to increase the racial diversity and the quality of your workforces. So thank you. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.